So, do you remember that computer? Maybe you weren't even born at that stage. Well, that's the era that email was developed in, and as you can guess, the security issues that we have now weren't even considered back then, which is why email is one of the most unsecure forms of communications these days. As useful as it is, security for emails, standard emails, is a major issue. Really have to be aware of that. Back then, when we were sending emails, we just used the name of the person. There were no @ signs because it was going off to the same server. We all shared the same server, we were all in the same building. And it was a real change of habits for us when more than one server got involved, and we needed to use the @ sign in the email address to make sure it got to the right server so the person could read it. So that was a level of security that was involved back then, because it was a physical security. If you had access to the terminal, you went through locked doors and all of those sorts of things, that meant that you were secure and you were clear to access it. Totally different these days, which means we are now facing a totally different issue that was never even thought of at the time that email was conceived. So things to deal with phishing, to deal with spam, to deal with ransomware attacks, all of those sorts of things, they were just not something that could even be imagined, let alone prepared for, yet back in the 60s and 70s when email was getting its roots. Well, what can you do about it? Well, you could encrypt emails, and PGP is available as one example. There's other, you have more commercial ones, but PGP is in the public domain. It's easily available, and it does a really good job. To date, the PGP encryption has not been hacked. So even government organisations like FBI and so on, in America, they actually changed the laws to compel people to give the PGP keys over to law enforcement agencies rather than going through and trying to crack PGP. It is that good. However, it's just not practical, because it means people on both ends need to have PGP. They need to have the clients installed on the emails to use it, and that, while it's a very good system, is not practical because it's just not installed in those areas. Well, there are things that you can do. One of the things I forgot to mention that's a consequence of this, if you get an email scam which originates from your service through your emails being hijacked, then you run the real risk of being blacklisted. And once you get blacklisted, it takes a long time to clear that blacklisting. I've had to go through it for some clients, and the people who manage the blacklisting, they are sympathetic and they will do whatever they can to help clear that, but they are dealing with a security situation, and you need to prove to them beyond doubt that you yourself are not part of the security situation that tripped that change. And that takes a while, particularly when you get a lot of other people caught up in it, and they've got to keep going through everybody as they can. So there are some very real issues involved if your email system gets caught up in these scams. You do not want to be the origin of these scam emails, and you're never intentionally the origin, but emails can be hijacked and taken into account for that. Now, ways to minimise that risk is to use a set of standards called SPF, DKIM and DMARC. Now, without going into the technical details on those three, they all work together to confirm the origin of the email. And if you set those three up, then a lot of the email servers, when they receive emails going to these places, will also use those to verify the origin of the email. And if that is confirmed, then it is let through. So those things are easy to set up. They are widely used by email servers, and they are worth implementing, unlike PGP, which is very good, but it's not widely implemented. So that's what you can do, and I'd recommend that you get in and do that, and that would stop you to say 99% of the times being caught up in some of these scams. The other thing that I would suggest you do, which is separate to all of that, is to do with confidential information. Because even with what we're talking about with confirming the origin of the email, the content of the email itself is unencrypted. And anybody can see that email going backwards and forwards. And if you have personal information that you have a legal responsibility to keep confidential, then my suggestion is to not send it directly in the email, but to put that information off to the side on a secure server and send a link to that email, so that when the other person at the other end gets that email, they download securely that file and get that confidential information out of it. So, well, there's some tips for you. You really don't want to get caught up in being blacklisted, and you want to make sure that everybody in your organisation, whether it's a small business or a large business or whatever size in between, doesn't get caught up in ransomware or phishing or any of the spams. So these are some things that can help clear that and make life a lot easier for you.